There we are. I found it. Hello! We're off to a professional start. Hello and welcome to a live read with Varietal Literature. My name is Rory. Up above me here is Avalon Bourne, who will be doing the reading. Hello, Jennifer and GS. GS giving compliments on the dynamic opening. Well, thank you very much. It's one of our few moving openings because I get now 5 30-second stock videos a month for way too much money. Big Drew, a regular to Varietal Show, which is usually what's playing on Thursday nights here, says, I'm alive, I beat COVID, I'm not at work, I'm at the Varietal, and it's live. Yeah, it's good to have you, Big Drew, and I'm really glad to hear that COVID is, well, at least as much as possible behind you. What are we doing here tonight? Well, we're doing a live reading, and if you've never done a live reading before, or been around one before, they're usually done in coffee shops where you can barely hear people, and the latte foam machine is screaming in your ear.
Milk frother.
Sorry?
The milk frother.
The milk frother is screaming in your ear, and you're like, why do people read in these places? Except this one, instead of all of that, is instead going to come to you through the internet with the crisp, milk frothing free audio that you would expect from this channel. If you don't know what this channel is, Varietal Literature is a group of fiction writers mostly, but we also do a bunch of other stuff, from Vancouver, who went to school together, hung out for several years afterwards, and we publish up our own works on our website, varietal-literature.ca, which you can find a link to the story you're going to hear today in the description below, unless I forgot to do it, in which case let me know. But I'm pretty sure it's there. So that's me. I'm Rory. If you've ever watched this channel before, you know me pretty well, so I'm going to get out of the way and let Avalon introduce herself. Avalon?
Hello, everyone. I'm Avalon Bourne. I think most of you may have seen me on Lit Games before. I've done that a few times. As Rory said, we were part of the 2018 Writers Studio cohort at Simon Fraser, and our writing group has managed to stick around in the years since, trying to stay creative as best we can. And the story that I will be reading tonight, I actually started a couple years ago when our fiction group was doing these monthly short story themes, where we try and write a short story a month with a different theme. And our theme was around New Year's resolutions. I'm not a fan of New Year's resolutions. I think they sort of set you up for failure, particularly because January is about the worst time to start a new year. You kind of get through the holidays and then it's January and it's like, oh, it's still cold and gray and awful, but now I can't have anything that I enjoy because I've committed to these resolutions. So this story is really about a New Year's resolution gone wrong, worst case scenario, so to speak. So I think, we're in February now, so probably most people have given up, but, just in case you haven't, here's another reason to.
Well, if you guys have never been to a live read before, I'm talking to you, chat, and whoever is lurking out there. If you don't know, there is a live chat. You can communicate directly to us on a slight delay. We usually, what we'll do is we'll do our reading, which I'm going to get out of the way of and let her do it in just a moment. But after the reading, I'm going to ask some questions. If you folks have questions as the story goes along, you should put them in the chat, because that is how we will know to ask them. And we do a little bit of question and answer about the story or about Avalon in general. If you want to get really probing and prying into her life, she's super comfortable with that, I believe. She said, please expose, expose my life on the internet. So stick around after the story's done. It'll probably take about 20-25 minutes, depending on how many dramatic pauses Avalon chooses to put in, which I believe will be plenty. After that, we will have a little bit of a conversation with Avalon about her story here. Jennifer did note that Varietal has gone high def, and that is correct. The camera that you're seeing now not only has studio lighting, it's an actual camera, not just my webcam on what was a decent laptop, but still a webcam. I also shifted my background so that it's more dynamic and less likely to catch a million shadows. But anyways, this isn't about Varietal going high def. I'll say more about the Varietal and all that later, but I want to hand it over to Avalon. Avalon has several stories up on our website, so if you like this one, you can go and read it. Remember, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We're going to talk about after for about 20 minutes afterwards. And for the rest of you, I hope you enjoy the hunting party. I'm going to get out of your way, Avalon. You introduce and do whatever you need to do. It's your show.
Excellent. Thanks, Rory. So I've introduced the story a little bit, but I'll just perhaps give a little bit more of an intro. Yeah, so it's about a New Year's resolution gone wrong, but I think also about the dynamics between unhappy people or people who covet, or the way that you wish your life could be when you're thinking that everything sort of looks a little bit greener on the other side. I also came up with the idea for this story when I was driving home from one of our writing workshops. One of our cohort members lives in West Vancouver, and there was some construction happening along the sort of main road out. So I had to go this really convoluted detour, and there was no streetlights, and it was dark out. And I kept thinking that I was going to get lost in the British properties in West Vancouver and never make my way out. So that's kind of carried over into this story a little bit too. So I hope you like it. And without any further ado, this is The Hunting Party. I told you we shouldn't have come this way. Candace tried to keep the nasal overtone out of her words without much success. She didn't even have to look at the steering wheel to know that Jason's knuckles had tightened even further. What a frustrating way to end what had been a pleasant evening. Candace had decided that she would start the year off with an effort to socialize more, break out of the rut she frequently found herself in with Jason. She had leapt at the invitation to attend Beth's welcome to the New Year party. Beth was a fellow account manager in her office, a fellow account manager with a mountainside house in West Vancouver. There's construction on Mathers Avenue. I head to detour, Jason said through gritted teeth. Candace pushed down the leaden ball of anxiety in her stomach. She hated driving with Jason when he got tense. She wished she could keep silent, but the leaden ball forced out her words. Are you sure this is the right way? There aren't any street signs, and it's so dark. She regretted the words as soon as they left her mouth. Candace, do you want to drive? Oh no, that's right. You needed to have a whole bunch of fancy drinks. Candace shrank back into her seat. Jason wasn't being fair. He always wanted to drive. You wanted to get out more, so here we are, out, lost in this maze of cul-de-sacs. Jason spat out the last words. Silence fell over them, as thick and heavy as the darkness around them. Why don't these people have any streetlights? Jason muttered, nosing down a narrow lane, headlights shining onto tall black hedges on either side, the branches twisted and broken. I don't know, babe, it's frustrating. Candace tried for conciliatory. Time enough to talk about tone and temper when they got home. Jason gave an inch. This detour makes no sense. It's heading away from the highway. Maybe we have to go through the neighborhood. Look, there's another sign. Candace pointed to a hand-painted sign in reflective paint stapled to a telephone pole. Jason turned the car in the direction of the arrow, the headlights sweeping over the narrow shoulder and alighting upon an idling car. In the illumination of the lights, the car appeared empty. Someone probably gave up on this detour and decided to walk home, Jason said. Candace refrained from replying. The evening had been fine, she thought. Beth had thrown a wonderful party. Twinkly lights lining the driveway, a roaring fire in the enormous living room. The people inside as glittery as the shining orbs outside. Candace! Beth had greeted her effervescently, kisses to both cheeks. How lovely to see you. This must be your husband. She smiled at Jason. Come, both of you, grab a drink. The drink in question had been a punch of sorts, filled with citrus and hints of burnt sugar. This is really nice, Beth. Oh, thanks, love. It's an old-fashioned punch. Oh, a family recipe? Oh, no, like the drink, an old-fashioned. Jason smiled uncomfortably. Right, yeah. Beth smiled brightly. Excuse me a minute. I need to grab something out of the oven. Jason and Candace stood there sipping their punch. You know any of these people? Candace looked around the room. She didn't, as a matter of fact. The faces were strange, casting not unfriendly, but definitely curious glances their way. She shook her head. Well, I'm going to the can, if I can find it in this palace. Okay, don't be too long, Candace called after his departing back. Social situations like these made her nervous. She didn't want to hang off of Beth like some barnacle. She hoped Jason wouldn't linger, hiding out, playing on his phone. Hello. Candace started. A tall man with dark blonde hair stood at her elbow. Christ, Candace! Candace gripped her hands tightly, tugging at her fingers. Tension smoldered in the car, a heavy, chilling fog that separated the two of them. The road before them was barely visible, the headlights picking up the vague reflection of the sparse line separating the lanes. I thought this was a shortcut, Jason said through clenched teeth. It's a detour, not a shortcut. The opposite, really. God damn it. Jason slammed the palm of his hand against the steering wheel. They drove in silence. The night closed around the car, pressing in. No streetlights, no stoplights, only the road, endlessly unwinding. Candace pressed her lips together, the drinks she'd had earlier now leaving her edgy and unsettled. I'm Carson. How do you know Beth? Candace smiled nervously before answering. We work together in accounts. Oh yes, Bethy's told me about her little startup. Good for the both of you to help out and get things off the ground. Candace smiled, her teeth digging into her bottom lip. The startup was her and Jason's only source of income. Since Jason's mother had gotten sick, there wasn't enough money to pay for round-the-clock care for her. Jason's father had died several years prior, and his sister lived in Saskatoon. It fell to Jason and Candace to care for Jason's mother. Candace wondered how to convey something like this to someone like Carson, who seemed to view work as an entertaining pastime. It was exhausting, Candace thought, this life they had built for themselves. Jason barely looked at her with anything approximating interest anymore, unlike Carson, who definitely was. Beth and I are cousins, and I feel compelled to let you know that I tend to find these little gatherings rather dull, but here you are, and I'm wondering if I should revise my opinion. His teeth lined up in a white symmetrical grid, pristine rectangles. How nice of you to say. Candace looked down as she spoke, thinking how different her life might have been if she'd only been invited to these sorts of parties earlier. What's nice? Jason appeared at her elbow. Where the fuck are we, Candace? We're going in the complete opposite direction. Candace could feel the start of a migraine pressing down just beyond her temples. Tension pushed down her forehead as she tried to see through the dark. There, Jason, there, it's a sign. Candace pointed at another hand-painted sign with the word detour written in red reflective paint. It's leading even further up the mountain. This doesn't seem right. Well, we have to go around the construction, don't we? They drove slowly along an ever-narrowing road, the houses along the side replaced by towering hedgerows. Babe, this is not the right way. Irritation flooded Jason's tone. Candace knew he was holding back the onslaught of his frustration. All she wanted to do was stretch out next to him in their bed at home and let the exhaustion overtake her. This endless road, the anxiety thrumming along her spine into her stomach, the rigidity of Jason's jawline, all of it surrounded by creeping darkness. Carson smiled at Jason while Candace stood there awkwardly. Jason, this is Carson, Beth's cousin. What's nice? Jason repeated. Nothing, babe. Jason looked over to Carson for a beat before holding out his hand. Carson glanced at it and stuck out his own. Glad the two of you could make it up here. The three of them smiled awkwardly, and then Candace turned to Jason. I could use another drink. Jason looked at her, his lips pressed in a thin line. I'll get right on that. You good, buddy? Carson looked at him. Thanks, pal, I'm set. Jason nodded slowly before heading to the bar. Candace watched him walk away, hating herself for noticing how out of place he looked amongst all the other guests. Now I feel a bit foolish meeting your husband, Carson smiled ruefully at her. The two of you drive over? Candace nodded, wondering why she felt guilty. She could almost count on one hand the number of words she'd said to Carson. Look at the pair of you. Candace, I'm so happy you've met my cousin. Carson, Candace is such a love. Beth emerged through the crowd and grasped her cousin's arm as she beamed at Candace. I was just saying how wonderful it was of Candace and her husband to come all the way up here. Carson smiled at Beth. Beth ran her hands up and down Carson's considerable biceps. Absolutely. The pair of them smiled at Candace before Beth flounced off. Carson moved in closer. I am quite aware this is inappropriate, but I'm still going to ask for your phone number. Candace knew she was being stupid. She knew it as she took Carson's phone and entered her own number. She knew it as Carson dialed her number, as they smiled at each other. Jason returned with 2 glasses of punch. The road they were on was quickly becoming a rutted path, pavement devolving into gravel and dirt as Jason attempted to navigate through the gloom. Candace could hear a tiny voice in her head repeating over and over, "This is not right, this is not right, this is not right." It took her a moment to realize she had spoken the words out loud. Jason glanced at her, his face mirroring her own rising fear, before he took a deep breath and stopped the car. It's okay, babe, we're just lost. We gotta retrace our steps and figure out how to get back to the highway. His gentle tone calmed Candace slightly, but the work was undone when she saw him reach for the door handle. What are you doing? She yelped. It's okay, babe, I'm just gonna get my bearings. See if there's room to turn around up ahead. Jason paused and reached over to pat Candace on the arm. I'll be right back. We should hit the road, Candace. Jason shoved the glass of punch towards her, its dark contents sloshing over the edge and dripping onto the glaringly white couch. Jason, be careful! Jason stared at her, faint spots of color flaring on his cheeks. I don't think I'm the one who needs to be careful. I'll see you in the car. He stalked away, depositing both glasses on a side table. Candace felt a familiar knot of frustration form in her stomach. She glanced at Carson, her cheeks burning. Sorry about that. I should go. Carson patted her arm. No apology necessary. I will let Beth know you had to leave. Candace hesitated. It seemed rude to just leave. Go on. We don't want to keep Jason waiting. He was already turning away. Candace headed to the front entry before turning back as Carson called her name. There's construction on the Maid Road and back down to the highway. You should take the detour through the properties. There will be a sign as you head out of the neighborhood. Candace nodded and waited a moment, hoping for something more, but Carson had already turned away from her, and she watched him walk over to a group of coiffed blonde women. She turned back to the front door, noting the faint stains of whiskey on the carpet. The darkness surrounding the car was nearly absolute. The moon, a mere sliver in the sky, surrounded by faint pinpricks of light, their illumination faint. Candace waited in the car, watching the glow of Jason's phone slowly fade away. Tall hedges lined the cramped street. Candace tried to remember when they had turned onto this dirt road. There weren't even any streetlights. Were they on a private driveway? She clasped and unclasped her fingers, her nails digging into the softness of her palms. Where the hell was Jason? A scream cut through the night. Candace's hand jerked to the door handle. Jason, she whispered. Loud cracking sounds reverberated through the night, followed by another scream, which was quickly muffled. Silence descended. All Candace heard was the blood rushing in her ears, her heart pounding. Her fingers clutched the door handle as she reached for her phone with her other hand. No signal. A glint of silver caught her eye. The keys. She quickly slid across to the driver's seat, twisting the keys, hearing the engine pour to life. Bright beams of light slashed through the darkness as Candace turned on the high beams. The sound of the horn joined the brightness in invading the dark. "Jason!" Candace screamed into the night, honking the horn. "Jason!" Silence. Then, lights flickered in the gloom ahead of her. "Jason?" she called hesitantly. The lights grew, and she could hear something low and ominous. The crackling of dead leaves under many feet and the low murmur of voices. Candace froze, her hands on the wheel, her heart pounding and jumping. Suddenly, she lurched the car into reverse. How far back was the turnoff? The car careened from side to side as she tried to find her way backwards. The lights grew fainter as she tried to speed away. Back and back and back, past endless looming hedges, the moon barely lighting the way until she collided with a crash, the back of the car crumpling up as Candace hit her head against the steering wheel. Pain cracked through her forehead. She sagged against the steering wheel, her ears ringing, her mind cloudy. The pain radiated, dripping down her face, or was it blood? Through the pain, she was aware of a pervasive sound, a howling, a keening. Are those dogs? The sounds grew louder. Candace pulled herself upright, gasping at the banging in her head. The barking grew louder. Candace craned her neck, looking over her shoulder, seeing the large metal gate that had barred her way. How did... The gate was firmly padlocked. Oh no, oh no, oh no. The car door fell open as Candace pushed it, staggering outside, blood dripping down the side of her face. She realized what little ground she'd gained with her frantic backwards attempt at escape. "Candace!" Her head whipped toward the sound of Jason's voice. "Candace!" "Jason?" she whispered into the dark. From a break in the hedges, she saw a staggering form. "Jason!" She lurched towards him, branches slashing at her face and shoulders. Howling became louder. "We have to get out of here, babe! We have to get out of here now!" Jason clutched at her. A deep gash ran along the side of his face. Blood sputtered from his shoulder. "What happened to you?" She ran her fingers gently over the side of his face. "There's no time, babe. We have to go now. It's some kind of hunting party. I couldn't see their faces. They're all wearing hoods." "What about the howling?" "I didn't see any dogs. I think it's on a speaker." "How do we get out of here? There's a padlock on the gates that came out of nowhere." Jason grabbed her arm and pulled her into a furrow under the hedges against a dark stone wall. "The detour signs were bullshit, Candace. We were lured here to this estate, whatever it is. We've got to get over the wall, back onto a main road." Jason was panting, his breath hot against her cheek. Okay, let's go." The only sound was the ragged hitch of their breathing as they crept through the foliage, keeping the looming darkness of the wall on their left. Jason leaned against Candace, and she felt warm stickiness spreading over her arm and shoulder. "Jason, how badly are you hurt? You're bleeding everywhere. What happened back there?" "No time," he gasped, pushing the words out with an exhalation of air. "They were waiting for us. I can't." He slowed as he attempted to catch his breath. Who were waiting for us? What is going on? Candace couldn't help herself as the questions tumbled out of her mouth. The sounds of the night enveloped them, sounds removed from those that had grown familiar. There were no sounds of cars, of sirens, of doors slamming, of the faint filtered sound of television. There was just darkness and the rustling of the wind. Burning pain flared up the side of Candace's chest, a stitch knitting and unknitting itself. Her arm was sticky with Jason's blood. They had been walking for hours, or moments. It was hard to tell in the dark. Every so often, the crunching of grass and leaves and mulch flickered across the silence. Jason's hitching breath also contributed to the uneven cacophony. "What do we do, Jason? Please, what do we do?" "Keep moving. Come on, babe, there has to be a way out of here." Candace kept moving, her heart thumping, when they emerged next to an old-fashioned driveway. How clever. The voice dripped over the cobblestones of the driveway, as rich and sweet as the punch at the party. "Carson," Candace gasped, turning about, her pump sinking in the mud. "You want to be part of us so much, don't you? Give us the man. You don't need him. He only drags you down. Come on, Candace. You would fit right in with us. Think of all the fun you would have at our parties." Brightness burst through the black. Candace's pupils recoiled, and she stumbled backwards. The break in the hedges was directly behind her. She sensed rather than felt the openness of the air. She could do it. She could push herself out of this hell. Jason's arm brushed against hers as she swayed, fighting to stay on his feet. Any choice involving escape wouldn't include him. "Go, Candace, just go," Jason said. "It is not a difficult choice, Candace. He is a broken anchor around your neck, weighing you down. There is so much more you could have." Carson's voice floated through her strained thoughts, softening the jagged edge of her breath. "What do I do?" Each word pounded in her brain as sweat dripped down her neck, the small of her back. It was a struggle, her life, a struggle against tedium, against mediocrity. What person would she be if she didn't have a creased line running down her forehead? Carson had emerged from the light, and his golden features came into focus, just as she sank to her knees, exhaustion sinking through her, cold and heavy. She reached out her hand to Jason. He met hers, passing her a solid object. "Do what you need to do, babe, please." Candace felt the object in her hand as she gazed up at Carson. He reached down to caress her face. "You put up a good fight, Candace, but now it is over." Candace looked up at him and set her jaw. "It is over, Carson." The object in her hands, the knife Jason had passed her, plunged upwards. Lights picked up the arc of blood following the knife as Candace pulled it out at the side of Carson's neck. His words died on his tongue as Candace rose to her feet. "Run!" Jason crouched in the mud, his face a pale smudge. "Run, Candace!" She looked at him as noise joined the light, and she turned towards the hole in the hedge and ran.
Yay! I am delighted. Just give me a second here. Everybody in the chat is going to take a second to catch up, but I'm sure that they are just getting ready to give you the quietest yet most profound set of applause. And let's switch over to our more typical music here, and then we'll ask you some questions. There we go. Well, how was it to read it? Especially after a day of work, which I would like to point out, chat. She came here straight from work and then just put out that great performance of reading a story. So, I mean, you guys better be all impressed and thankful.
Well, thanks very much. It's a little bit weird doing it virtually. I've done, a few readings before, but always in person. And when it's being done virtually, it's a little bit, you don't really get any, body language or facial cues from the audience. So you kind of just hope that, I hope they like it. I hope it makes sense.
Yes.
So.
Yes, exactly. I'm inclined to agree with you. The one thing that I didn't expect, because I've been doing a lot of live streaming now, and I didn't expect how hard it is to read the audience. To give an example, we have a few people in chat talking, but we have regularly about half the viewers not using chat, which is fine. But they come back regularly, and I'm always like, what do you like? I don't know what you like. Sometimes they're not there. So, it's really hard to know. So, yeah, I feel you on that. And knowing, are you laying it on too thick? Or should you up the drama or something? These are decisions you make on the fly. And if there's no response, you have no idea. I think you did a great job, though.
Thank you very much.
Yes, there are many applause. Sorry.
Yeah, and there looks like there's quite a few comments, and chat was pretty active during the story, so I'll take that as a good sign. I especially like the Admiral Akbar reference. Detour was a trap, so.
I definitely. Some of it was just sort of undercutting it with their own sarcasm about West Van and whatever else, but no, at no point did it seem like anybody disengaged with the story. So the you mentioned that you had you mentioned that you'd gotten this idea for the story. I remember you telling me about this actually when you had left one of our members' houses, someone who hasn't been on the stream but we still talk to now and then, who lives in West Van. And by the way, if you're not from Vancouver, West Van is sort of our Beverly Hills. Like, it's a pretty ritzy area. If you're like a movie star who lives in Vancouver, you probably live in West Van.
A lot of the Real Housewives of Vancouver, I think most of them live in West Van.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine where else they would be. But it is actually, just to situate it a bit, it is right at the crest of a bunch of mountains and forest. So what happens is you go further and further up a mountain, and you get into this weird mix of like backwoods creepiness and $14 million houses with 9 pools and Lamborghinis out front. Like it's this strange mix of, old growth tree, and there's a Lamborghini. So I think it's a perfect setting for the kind of story that you're doing, this sort of high class barbarism.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit too about wealth inequality, and how maybe the super rich perhaps can't be trusted to have the best intentions towards
what are you talking
the
about?
rest of us 99%. So a little bit of that in there as well. Some late stage capitalist commentary.
Elon's my friend. I don't care what you say. So if you don't mind me asking a question here, there were some things that I found interesting about the story. And one of the things I find interesting is about half the story is really about these two people in a car. And I think it's interesting because, for a few reasons, it's interesting because ultimately it becomes this fairly gory, high energy chase through a forest is the point, and you wouldn't expect it to start with two people arguing about directions in a car. But it's oddly A, relatable, and B, it is mirrored in the final scene. So you get this intro scene of them looking around and trying to find where they're going with these false detour signs. But then in the end of the story, there's also this moment of sort of like, I don't know what to do, and Jason wants to do something, but this time it's abandon me to death. And I was wondering if that sort of mirror of, like, even in serious situations, the relationship dynamic remains. I wonder if that was an intentional thing or if that just accidentally worked out that way.
I think it was a little bit of both. Like, I think when I sort of did, the first draft, I did kind of want to have, some mirroring of the opening, and then kind of after I got, the rough sort of skeleton of it down, I went back and thought, yeah, I'm gonna make this a little bit more obvious, because I do think that there's something about certain relationships where somebody so well, and there's such an intimacy there, but when it's also kind of tied up with like resentment or dysfunction, it's really, really hard to break out of that, like even in situations of life or death, or like high tension. I think so I kind of wanted it to mirror the beginning, but also be like, okay, here they are being hunted, but like there's still like the same dynamic where Candace like can't stop herself from being like, how are we gonna get out of this, Jason? And and Jason like can't contain like his frustration and anger with her. So yeah, like there it's like two of them against this marauding pack of rich people, and it's still like they're still caught and like in this same dynamic. So I kind of thought that was a little bit fun.
I thought it was delightfully darkly comic through to the end. Like, I think the comedy of it becomes more and more subdued, and like more and more situational. Like you'd have to keep your awareness of the whole story to really see how that's comic. But I think there is this sort of brilliant comedy still underlying, like he's bleeding to death and she still won't make her own decisions. Like she still won't take control of the situation. And I thought that was so delightful, because the thing is like the idea of the rich hunting the poor is not a completely brand new one. No. But the so I was curious to see what take you would take on it, because you are a person who excels at writing about the minutia of relationships, especially ones that aren't particularly that are more like average relationships, like familial, like moment to moment relationships, than like big high drama romantic or hatred or whatever else. And I really enjoyed the way that you fuse this concept with like two bickering people about where to go. And I think it was relatable. I don't know about other people. Jennifer says Tony takes offense to this characterization of West Van. What is?
He grew up in West Van, so
not
all West Vancouverites.
Oh, whatever. They could just pay to have us silenced. It'll be fine.
No, I'm glad that you got, the humor and related to it, because so Mike is watching this. He's in the other room. Mike's my partner, and I actually, not that Mike and I have the same relationship as Candace and Jason, but I did mirror some of, being in the car, being lost, you're getting frustrated with each other. Like there was some of that where I'm like, yeah, I've been in that situation, and you're just, like you're annoyed and you're anxious. And so you start bickering. So I think, I think that's pretty relatable for a lot of people. But then, I just wanted the stakes to be really, really high. So.
And that those high stakes cannot remove pettiness. You had, I remembered when you had originally proposed this, and I think to lend to the idea that, because I think everybody assumes a story is autobiographical, so just to lend more to the point that this isn't autobiographical, the originating incident where you got lost from detours in West Van, which I remember that night very clearly, you were not in the car with your partner. You were in the car with a bunch of other writers who were probably all also going, are we going to get shot? But I was going to ask, because I know that even when you had like decided this was what you wanted to write, it still took a few months. And it's not like that's unusual for a writer, but it's a bit unusual for you, because you're a person who can just get it done when you need to get it done. And it seemed like this one gave you a lot of trouble. And because I assume we do have some writers who come and watch us, is there a reason why this story in particular like got you stuck, or was it just time?
I had trouble ending this one because I didn't, I think like with these, these kinds of stories, because they have been, done before, I didn't want to have like a typical ending. I didn't want it to be a happy ending, because
that's not your way.
Yeah. Who wants to read that?
Yeah.
But I wanted to kind of keep, some of the really dark humor throughout it. And so I think I was just really struggling with the ending, where I had, these two sort of storylines, the party and then the drive, and that was sort of working really well. And then when I kind of got to, okay, like I know that they're gonna get lost like on this estate and get trapped, but I was just having a really tough time with how I was going to end it. And I had a few different ideas, and it just, it just wasn't working. And I'm a big believer in that, like writer's block isn't so much like, oh, I can't write anymore. It's that you just haven't figured out the best path forward. So, I try to just write through it, even if whatever I'm writing, the whole time I'm thinking, this sucks, I hate this is stupid. Because sometimes you just have to get that out. So I think it took me a little bit longer because I was turning over all of these different endings in my mind before I landed on one that I thought would work well.
Do you want to share one of the other competing endings?
I mean, the other one that I was kind of looking at was that they either both died or they either both escaped. That just didn't really work. Because I think, like if they both die, then you kind of lose like the dysfunction between the relationship, because I think it was important for Candace to live and basically be like, Jason, I need you to tell me what to do. And Jason finally has to tell her, like, just go, like, just get out of here. And if they both escape, it was sort of the same thing. Like, okay, like now what? So I sort of settled on this ending because I thought it made the most sense.
I heard somebody the other day say that open endings are an indication. I don't know if I agree with this, by the way. Open endings are an indication that you're meant to look at the metaphorical meaning over the literal. Do you feel like there's anything to that in your somewhat open ending? Like there is some closure and some not.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I think, with this sort of story, I think it is meant to be more metaphorical, because I think the story starts to fall apart a little bit if you start taking it too literally.
Right.
Like if Candace escapes, like she's gonna go to like the police station, and this all gets kind of taken care of, and like the risk of these people doing this is so high. So I don't think it sort of bears peering at it too closely under a literal lens. Like I think it is sort of meant to be metaphorical, and sort of taken like with a grain of salt.
That makes sense to me. Yeah, absolutely. Jennifer says Tony is now complimenting you on your characterizations of light, headlights sweeping over the landscape, catching the silver of the keys. I think as a writer, one thing I like about lights is it gives you a chance to have a tying thread to a description of everything in the room or in the area, which the other thing that can kind of do that is wind, because wind moves everything. But I don't know if light had any other greater significance to you in the story.
I think I was with when they're driving, it was more an absence of light. So it's dark, they don't know where they are, it's confusing. And then when they're at the party, like it's like starkly bright, there's like a blinding white couch and carpet, and there's lights everywhere. So I think it was just trying to have the two counterparts. And also the fact that when Candace is there with other people, like it's all bright and filled with light, and then when it's just her and Jason, it's just dark.
Yeah, I think the way I had looked at it was it sort of cuts out the scene for people, for sure. GS says, so you didn't consider her joining the hunting party? I think I know the answer to that, but I'm curious what yours is.
I think I felt like that was maybe like a little bit of a cop-out, like for Candace. Like she's just not, she's an indecisive person, like she's not a definitive person, and so I think having her do that would be too much of a decision.
I mean, I agree when you say it. It makes perfect sense, but it was not what I saw coming. I mean, that's a great point. Yeah. I think that's lovely. Thank you for that question, GS. That's a great question.
Thank you.
I personally have had some ideas for stories over the last couple of months, and the block that I have run into is how to tell it. So, like, for people, I'm assuming that this makes sense to you, Avalon, but for people in the chat who aren't writers, the difference between having an idea and knowing how you're going to tell the story is just months of sweat and tears. Like you can have a concept that's very clever, and you can even have like an end scene in mind where you're like, this is where it'll go. But how, like, from whose perspective and what voice and what is my focus and all of that stuff, all of that can straight up kill ideas sometimes. And one thing that I noticed when I was reading this story originally, because I'd read an earlier draft of it for you, was how complex the structure is. Like, it is complicated to have written this in a way where you have kept it as sensible as you do. And I think it slips by maybe the average reader just how much skill goes into being able to move that much around, back and forth through time, back and forth through space, which, by the way, are things they'll tell you in writing school not to do, because they're afraid that you will get yourself into corners you can't get out, or no one will know what's going on. But at no point did I have that feeling. So why would you make your life so hard as to write it so complexly as you did?
Well, first off, thanks very much for those comments. It's always nice to hear. And I think with this story, I think when I was writing it, I knew that I wanted it to start with this couple having a fight in the car because one of them, had sort of made them go do something that was out of the ordinary for them, and it didn't go well. But then I was like, hey, it actually isn't that interesting to try and sustain a narrative that's completely contained within this car and like two angry people. And so I thought, okay, I think this would be more interesting if we could sort of jump, back to earlier in the evening. But then it's also like we're getting them, it's like they're thinking through what had happened previously. So they're sitting in this car in silence and then sniping at each other and then silence. And then during the silence, they're thinking back on how they got, to this point where they're so irritated with each other. So I thought that that sort of helped fill in both the literal space in the story, but also the metaphorical space where they're just going to be sitting there silently next to each other for 10-15 minutes thinking about what happened previously. So I wanted to kind of give a visual to that.
I think that's what makes it work. GS said, I noticed that the back and forth was done very competently. I must say, I normally get lost when a story does that, but not in this case. And you're not alone, GS. It is...
That's great.
It's a tightrope walk. When a writer decides that they're going to use any flashbacks, everybody in the room clenches up. Because the amount of... If you've ever been to a reading group or anything like that, the amount of times where that technique is terrible and no one knows what's going on is more often the case than not. But I think you just pointed out what works, which is the brain can follow a rhythm and a reason, right? So as long as it's not just cutting for pace, it's cutting within the themes and narrative of the conversation. Even if people don't notice that's why they understand it, I think their brain will be able to absorb it. Yeah, I think it was one of the things, what has always stood out for me about your writing, and I think you guys should check out other writing that Avalon has done on the Varietal website, which is actually linked below this. This is the Varietal here. There you go. This is the Varietal page. But if you actually scroll down to it, if you go to the link in our description and scroll all the way down, it will link you to other things that Avalon has done, a version of her and the other woman. I think one thing that always has stood out to me about your writing is you have a competency around complexity, but you are not grandiose about, you don't boast about it. You just sort of quietly go in and tinker on these these old clocks of stories, I guess, you know, the intricate little gear systems in there, and then you shut the cabinet and you go, yes, this just tells time. Like you're perfectly willing to just let people believe that this wasn't as complicated as it was. And I think it can slip by. And so I just wanted to pull out some of that complexity. There's more to it that I could get to, but I don't want to take too much of everybody's time. There are some questions though. Did you consider the car driving through the hunting party? I think you had established that it was disabled. That was my understanding.
Well, I did. I thought about that a little bit because, you know, she gets in the car and then she just, you know, tries to back up and get out of there. And yeah, I think I did consider it, but I think it didn't seem to me to be in keeping with like Candace as a character. Like again, like I think that would be like an act of aggression that's not really the person that she is. I think it made more sense for her to like just try and get out of here, and then, you know, have that just completely fail. But I did think about it. I did sort of think about, okay, yeah, like maybe she just, you know, tries to use a car as a weapon, but it didn't sort of sit right in terms of who I thought she was as a character. So I went with her backing up and smashing into a gate.
And then GS says, further to Drew's question, you chose not to describe our main couple physically. Do you feel that's unnecessary?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I didn't really think that. I guess like with a short story, you know, you're kind of limited in terms of page space, and I tried to kind of give a sense of who Candace and Jason were through other means, you know, like the way, like the conversations that they have, you know, with each other and with Beth and Carson at the party, you know, the way that Carson kind of like reacts to Candace. Like, yeah, I tried to give a sense of who they were as characters in a way that, you know, just wasn't a physical description. You know, one of the things that is probably not my area of strength when it comes to writing is doing personal descriptions or physical descriptions. I guess because I just don't really think about it. You know, I think when I do my own reading, I tend to just come up with, you know, the way someone looks in my head, and then even if they say, oh, well, they were really tall and they had blonde hair, and like, no, I'm picturing like this very small person with like dark hair and glasses, and like that's it. It won't change regardless of what the description is. So that's that is something that I sort of skirt around in my own writing and try to think about, you know, other ways to kind of get who they are across, beyond a physical description. I see that GS says, yeah, the core of many thrillers, the indecisive female. So yes, that was definitely a trope that I seized upon for this story.
I actually expected you to do more to undermine it, because one of the sort of defining characteristics of almost every conversation I've had with you off camera, for the most part, is you love the genres that tend to have the worst opinion of women, and and as a result, something you really like to do is to take genres that have a terrible opinion of women and write them with a better opinion of them. Like, for example, I mean, the most obvious one being the project that you worked on for many years was a Gothic novel, which involved a bit of role reversal about how Gothic novels usually portray things. So I expected it to be a little more undermined, but I guess I did feel that it wasn't, just in defense of you here, I did feel like it wasn't as typical, because I felt like the focus wasn't about what a drag this woman was. It was about the dysfunction of their relationship.
Yeah.
How they fed each other.
I agree. Like I do like to try and play with tropes. But the other thing, the other type of writing that, or style, or character that I really like to use is I like to write about unlikable women. I think just so often, we expect, female characters to be relatable, or to be likable, or to have something in there that kind of draws us to them. And I don't really want to do that. I much prefer writing all characters, but female especially, as unlikable, or as just sort of, not sort of the typical kind of characters you see. And so I think, with this one, it wasn't, like Candace was kind of annoying and indecisive and all of that. But, Jason was not great either. So I think, it was about this, very dysfunctional couple who, for their own reasons, decide to make kind of a series of poor decisions and then wind up in this really horrible situation.
GS says yes, their dysfunctional relationship was the star of the story. Big Drew, I'm not sure I understand this, but I'm going to read it. Big Drew says the car could have also carried a King-esque twist, I'm assuming Stephen King, that would see the car become possessed, but that would require other similar elements, wouldn't it? I mean, yeah, if you're worried about, like, the audience, but if you're going to have fun, no. I thought it would have been hilarious if even the car was telling her what to do. It's funny, actually. I relate to you on that, because I remember there's a project that I've worked on for many years. Like, I go back and forth between that no one in the chat has ever heard about. It's a book, and like the number one question I get on a regular basis from people who are helping and giving feedback about that book was, why is it about this protagonist? Like, this I think you're the only one who has ever taken my side that book should be told from the protagonist that it's being told from. And they're right in their own way, but I'm with you on the fact that I'm like, no, I want unlikable people I want my audience to give them a chance. There's so many charismatic book protagonists, and there's like nowhere to go with it, really. Like, what are they're usually sad about their own situation in life. Like, what was Harry Potter's problem? His mom was killed by an outside force. Everything else was fine, frankly. He was rich, he was famous, everyone was on his side, and he had more power than every other wizard. And he was like charismatic, and people were mean to him, but they were obviously wrong and not otherwise popular, right? That's not most people. What about the friendless?
I remember when I went to a writing retreat one year, and one of the visiting writers, I was speaking with her about, writing unlikable characters, because as I've said, that's what I like to do. But I think sometimes, though, the challenge is, like, if you're just writing a really horrible person, it can be a little bit off-putting for your readers. So you have to have a hook, right? Like, if you're going to write unlikable characters, they have to be like really good at their job, or they have to be funny, or like they have a dog that they're nice to, or like there has to be some sort of hook, or like the sort of storyline itself has to be funny, or there just has to be something in there that people can kind of seize upon. So that, like, the whole experience isn't just like, oh, why am I reading about this awful person? But I think, like, they're like, we love villain stories, right? Like, as a culture, like, we love reading about, the perspective of the person who's meant to be the antagonist, or meant to be, like, who's not the hero. Like, I'm seeing, some Disney examples in the chat, and I would love to read The Little Mermaid told from Ursula's perspective. That sounds amazing.
You should just write it. That'd be great fan fiction.
Like, Ursula's probably my favorite Disney character of all time. So, but yeah, but I think you know, like we want to know, you know, about the people who are kind of, you know, awful and terrible and unlikable. You just have to sort of, you have to make it entertaining, right? I think, you know, whatever you're writing, like whatever your story is, like there still has to be kind of a level of entertainment so that it's enjoyable, and you know, and you're able to hook the reader into actually, you know, enjoying whatever you're reading.
And I think the character should be understandable. Like I think there's a big difference between, you know, an uncharismatic character that otherwise makes sense to a person, and then like just nonsense mean characters that I'm supposed to like that. That's a bit of a different story. All right. Well, we've hit our hour mark. And that means that we are going to wrap things up here. If you have any other questions or anything you want to cram in, now's the time to do it. Avalon, thank you so much for coming down and reading The Hunting Party. Again, if you guys want to read it yourself, if you missed some part or you want to share it with a friend and they prefer to read, the link is down in the description for Varietal Literature's webpage that will take you directly to the thing you're seeing on the screen right now, the Hunting Party page. And, of course, there's a whole bunch of other stories and experimental fiction and poems and short stories and choose your own adventures and lots of fun things that we do there with narrative, because that's what we do here at Varietal. We have fun with narrative. On Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m., I read folk tales and fairy tales from various places around the world. And I've been doing that for about a year, and there's a whole playlist for it on the channel if you guys want to chill out and listen to some old stories, including the original Little Mermaid, which I did in the first month we ran, actually, I think it was, or maybe the second month, which is a significantly darker, substantially more disturbing version of the story than The Little Mermaid. Little Mermaid was, I think, the first movie I saw in theaters, by the way, so I have a strong association to it. And thank you to everybody that was in the chat, GS, Big Drew, Jennifer, and all of you who were lurking in the background. I know Avalon appreciates it, and I appreciate it as well. If you enjoy live reads like this, we even have a playlist about live reads, other stories, including myself, reading the first 2 parts of some stuff that I've put out there, and Felix Wong, and so on. But Avalon, that's me blabbing. You guys can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at varietal_lit. Where can we follow you, Avalon?
You can follow me on Instagram at Avalon Bourne. I do a whole bunch of mini book reviews that are usually pretty irreverent, but also showcase some really great books. Thanks so much for everyone for sticking around and listening to my story, and for the great comments and questions in chat. It's always nice to get some feedback and hear from all of you about what you liked or didn't like, or questions, or all of that. So thanks so much.
Yeah, it can get lonely being a writer and never really knowing, especially in a pandemic. Oh, and we also have 5 of those mini reviews we put into video format in a playlist on this very channel. And if you like Avalon and you like her reviews, you should definitely go and watch it. It will help justify us continuing to do it. I've been Rory, and this has been Avalon, and this is Varietal Literature, and you can go where you want, but the coffee shop's closed. Have a good day, guys.
Thanks, everyone.